More action, more comedy, and more funny banter between Will Smith and Martin Lawrence, so strap in for this review. Hello everyone, and welcome to another movie review here on TBR Media's YouTube channel. My name is Jared, and today we are going to be reviewing Bad Boys Ride or Die. This is the follow-up to 2020's Bad Boys for Life. This essentially is kind of the continuation of this soft reboot of the Bad Boys franchise. When their former captain is implicated in corruption, the two Miami police officers, the Bad Boys, have to work to clear his name. Bad Boys Ride or Die is directed by the same directing duo that did Bad Boys for Life, and that is Adil El Arbi and Bilal Fallah, and stars Will Smith, Martin Lawrence, Vanessa Hudgens, Eric Dane, and of course Joe Pantoliano. I would also be remiss not to mention Rhea Seehorn because I absolutely love her and everything that she does, both pre and post Better Call Saul. I think she's fantastic. And in a moment, I'm going to get into maybe some of the things that I didn't like about this particular installment. But first, let's talk about the positives here. Bad Boys Ride or Die is positioned very uniquely in this franchise. I think we're starting to see the Fast and Furious kind of ramifications of kind of an evolving property coming to its own terms and figuring out what it wants to be in 2024. Here, the action is elevated, the jokes are on point for the most part, and there's an underlying sense of real compassion and empathy for these characters, both from the audience to them and between each other. And I feel like that's what is positioning Bad Boys Ride or Die in a really good spot to do some numbers, hopefully, at this weekend's box office. The chemistry between Will Smith and Martin Lawrence might have been rocky in the first 30 minutes roughly. The jokes weren't quite landing yet, and there was kind of this unease about the quality of the writing, but nonetheless, eventually by the time we get to the second and third act, it really starts to form its true identity. And you can feel the love that these two have for these characters and this property. You can see just how fun it is making a movie like this, just based on their performances. Bad Boys Ride or Die really centers its focus on aging and what it means to look back at the past and not recognize yourself. There's a really interesting dynamic and kind of this switch that ultimately happens in Ride or Die. If you're a fan of the franchise and have watched the other movies, you know that when you're watching this one, it feels different because the characters don't quite feel like themselves. And that's accelerated by time itself. And I don't expect movies and characters within popular big franchises like this to stay stagnant and to stay static over the years and not really have much change. I think this is a recent phenomenon that we've seen with Fast and Furious where it feels like we're not really getting anywhere. Yeah, sure, they introduced new characters and new plot lines for the main, cast, but ultimately, it leaves a lot to be desired in terms of actual character development and growth, and this is the antithesis here. This movie has done everything it possibly could to retain its identity that so many people have come to love about this franchise, and at the same time, push the envelope forward to make sure that we're getting enough thematic satisfaction out of what we're watching on screen to really feel like these characters are fluid and they're constantly growing. Eric Dane's villain is kind of one note. I much prefer him on Euphoria. I think what he does with that show in particular is really something special, and we don't really get that kind of underside of his performance here, although they do build the groundwork for his character, what his past was like, who he was prior to where we're seeing him in Ride or Die, that ultimately just is exposition and not really characterized in the plot in its entirety, and I think that was a missed opportunity for someone with the acting caliber of Eric Dane. Alexander Ludwig and Vanessa Hudgens are great here. They're great additions to the cast just to round everything out, and you'll remember that I was really excited about Rhea Seehorn joining the Bad Boys franchise just because I was excited to see what she was able to do with her career after Better Call Saul, dipping into that action kind of blockbuster franchise world. But I don't think that the writing was particularly as strong with some of these supporting characters. And I also feel like the scripting maybe for this entire plot, this kind of exposition dump that we get about what happened to Captain Howard in between the last film and this one, was kind of lackluster. I feel like they could have done much more in terms of fleshing out that storyline. This is a movie that felt maybe a little bit bloated, but at the same time, it could have used some, 15, 20 minutes more to just kind of give you a really solid foundation for where we were and where they ultimately went. I'll give major kudos, though, to the crew for this film. In particular, I think the cinematography and the editing departments worked tremendously well together in this film. I think there was a synergy, it felt active, it felt fluid, and it felt like the tension and the stakes were actually, risen to the occasion instead of just feeling like it was out of place in the story. The decisions that were made as far as the POV shots specifically and the way that, they handled slow motion and they handled different elements to this, they used it to great effect for comedy, but they also used it for great effect to the action. And I feel like that's going to be a pretty divisive comment because I know for me anyway, the actual act of hyper-stylization in terms of editing and cinematography often, kind of drowns out everything else that's around it, performances, writing, whatever it may be, even shot composition. When they're hyper-stylized like they are in Bad Boys Ride or Die, it sometimes just feels like it's too much. But they were able to avoid all of that. So while some of the casting, particularly Reyes Sehorn, which hurts my heart, and the writing surrounding, the whole plot device, how they used Captain Howard here, didn't really work for me. You're kind of sitting there wondering why they're even doing this again. By the way, both Will Smith and Martin Lawrence have said that they're down for one more movie, so maybe we have that to look forward to in the future. I just hope they take this stepping stone that they did in Ride or Die with how they handled those two characters, our two main bad boys, and really take it to the next level in a follow-up or another installment, because I think that that was one of the things that really made this stand out over something like the latest Fast and Furious. But those are all just my opinions. Let me know what you guys think of Bad Boys Ride or Die down in the comments below, and make sure to give this video a like if you enjoyed the review, and we will see you in the next movie review. Bye, everyone.